If you're not familiar with me, my name is Trevor. I'm Dubsado's Customer Education Specialist, and today is a Dubsado Basics webinar. We're going to be covering contracts and invoices exclusively. If you're relatively new to Dubsado, this is going to be a fantastic place for you to kind of get the ball rolling with your Dubsado account. And if you are a little bit more experienced with Dubsado, that's okay too, because you might catch a couple things here and there that you're not even aware of or familiar with. So stay tuned. What I would love everyone to do is, while we're going through the webinar and while we're going through the examples, I'm going to be doing entirely a live demo. We're not doing any presentations. I'm just going to be doing everything in front of you all live in a Dubsado account. So if you have questions about whatever I'm doing, please, by all means, drop them in the chat as I'm going through. I'm going to be checking the chat very frequently to see if there's any questions. This is going to be very similar to just a one-on-one screen share call. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. I will answer them right here on stream. We're going to go through contracts, contract customization, smart fields, package templates, and sending an invoice out as well. So we're going to get kind of a lot of content in here today, but it's all the really important basic stuff that you need to know how to do in order to utilize your Dubsado accounts to the fullest. So again, really fantastic stuff if you're brand new, but if you have questions, throw them in the chat and we'll cover them. Cool. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen and we'll get right to it. Okay. Fantastic. Cool. Transfer down. Fantastic. All right. Sweet. So again, we're going to be coming at this from a very beginner perspective for Dubsado. So if you're not really unfamiliar or you just signed up for Dubsado, this is the dashboard where you first land when you first log in. And today we're going to be focusing mostly on the Forms tab and the Package Templates tab, as well as inside of a project. So as far as navigation is concerned, we're going to click Templates here on the left-hand side, and then we're going to go down to Forms. So if you've just signed up for Dubsado and you haven't done too much here, this might look relatively familiar to you. There's going to be some sample different forms in here of different varieties. Now, I've edited some of these forms since this is one of my demo accounts. So you might not have as many forms in here as I do, but in this case, we're going to be focusing exclusively on contracts. And again, if you aren't super familiar with Dubsado, we have 5 different form types: contracts, subagreements, questionnaires, proposals, and lead capture forms. Again, just the contracts tab and this column right here is what we're focusing on today. And everyone does, if you have a brand new Dubsado account, have a sample contract. We're going to kind of scoot past that. I'm going to use a contract template that I've customized a little further just to kind of demonstrate some of the things we want to talk about today. So let's go ahead and just click on our contract template and let's take a look. So first thing we see here at the top is I already have my logo in here. And if you have a company logo and you wanted to add it to your form, it'd be really straightforward. Let's go ahead and just remove this and I'll show you how to add it back in. So let's go ahead and delete this element. And then over here on the left-hand side of the page, we have all of our different form elements. Now, if I go ahead and scroll down just a little bit, you can see here that we have images. And I can drag and drop this onto the page here. This is going to show up as just kind of this blank placeholder. And I can go ahead and click on that, and I can go ahead and grab any image that's in my image library. If you have that file on your computer and it's not in your image library already, you can go ahead and click Add Files to go ahead and grab a file from your desktop or your storage device to go ahead and upload it to Dubsado. And all I have to do is click on it from that side pane, and now it's added in here. Now you can see it's a little bit big actually. So I'm actually going to go ahead and reduce the size of it a little bit just because I think it's a little bit too big. Let's see, probably about 25%. Looks about right. We don't want to be too bombastic with how we're throwing our logo out there on a contract here. Obviously, the main point of a contract isn't necessarily to be super flashy, but we do want to have a little bit of our brand's, soul inside of our contract, just so they know who it's coming from. Okay, scrolling down a little ways, the first thing and the main thing I really want to talk about on the contract is smart fields. As you can see here in this little text box area, if I click into this, we have date, company/business name, client contact person, and project fee agreed to, but there's nothing here, right? This is a really common area for business owners to be spending a lot of time customizing the contracts for each client, especially if you have a large number of clients, right? It takes time to go ahead and enter in the existing dates, everyone's specific company or business name, the contact person, the exact amount that the person's agreeing to pay to, because it's probably going to vary from client to client. And we can use what's called smart fields to populate that information automatically, which is really fantastic. So if I click into this, if I double click, I can go ahead and set my cursor there in that date field there. And instead of typing out like a date, for example, right? Today is the 26th. So if I typed in 8/26/24 or 25, there we go, 24. If I just typed that out in my contract template, now that that's in this main master template, it's always going to show that exact dates for every single time I use this contract going forward. And I don't necessarily want that, right? I'm going to be sending out contracts today, maybe tomorrow, next week, right? Or tomorrow. That date is no longer going to be accurate. You'd have to update it each and every time. The way we can work around that is using a smart field instead of just plain text. So I'm just going to highlight that date. I'm going to say smart fields. And here within this smart field toolbar, this is how we access all of our main smart fields that we can use to populate information into other places of Dubsado. So in this case, I would be looking for a date field. So I'm going to scroll over to date fields, and then I'm going to go ahead and say medium date. As you can see here, that little chunk of code just got added in, and it's always began and ended with brackets, those double brackets. Whenever you see something in Dubsado that's double bracket on the beginning and the end, that is a smart field. So important thing is we always want to make sure we're adding in smart fields using this smart field toolbar. And there's a really good reason for that. If I were to try to maybe memorize this smart field, which would be kind of difficult anyways, because it's in sort of code speak, right? It's got CUR dates, which stands for current date. It'd be kind of hard to memorize firstly. But if I tried to type this out manually and maybe I forget that one bracket on the end there, that actually breaks the smart field. It breaks the code a little bit. So the important thing is if we go ahead and make sure to add it in from the smart field toolbar, we know that that smart field is always complete and accurate. So best recommendations is to always use the smart field toolbar when we're adding in smart fields. That way it makes sure that that smart field is not broken. It's going to function correctly and we don't have to worry about it going forward. So moving right along, now we have the current dates in here. This is always going to reflect the exact date that you applied that contract. So next week, if I have a contract that I want to send out to a client, it's not going to say the 26th. It's going to say, pardon me. It's going to go ahead and say that exact current date. So you don't have to worry about customizing the dates. And the same concept sort of applies to the rest of the information here as far as the smart fields are concerned, right? If I use company and business name here, I don't want to type out one client's contract or one client's company or business name. I'm going to use a smart field to populate that information because the idea here, especially for client contact person and the fee, we're going to be generating that information elsewhere in Dubsado. Likely when you had that client on board with you, maybe they filled out a Dubsado lead capture form. You ask them, hey, what's your business name? And in Dubsado, you probably saved that to that client's business name field. Now we can repopulate it into the contracts without you having to type anything else out. So for this particular field, I can go ahead and say smart field. I can say client, since this information is specific to the client. And then I can go ahead and scroll down a little ways and say, let's see here, where are we? Client company name. Sorry, it's a little small on my screen there. Someone post. Okay, cool. We got a Q&A already. Lori was asking, what's the difference in the dates? Yeah, Lori, good question. So let me click out of this. Let's see here. Highlight this real quick. So if I go back to these date fields here, date and time is going to be probably the standard one as well as medium. If I go down to the long date, it's going to just be listing out the actual dates in like month and full, like typed out version. Medium date would be the one that I picked there. Short date is just going to be more abbreviated. And then the time is just going to be listing out the exact time there. So if you wanted to do date and time, it's going to be listing the dates as well as the time. And then the medium date would just be the same sort of dates that I'm displaying right here. I'll show you when we get to a project what those different smart fields look like, Lori. That's probably a better way to do it. Since right now, if I click out of this, it's just showing me the smart field. It's not going to populate what that information is there. Basically, it's just trying to show if I want to show like the more condensed version of the dates or a much longer, like spelled out like August 26th, 2020, that kind of thing, essentially. It's going to be just your preference. It all comes down to preference as far as aesthetics, if you wanted to have it listed out entirely or not. Make sense, Lori? Again, I'm happy to show that when we get to the project where we can actually populate that date. Okay, moving right along here. So again, we have clients.company.name in there for the person's business name. Now we can go on here, client contact person. In reality, this is probably just going to be your main client, right? So we can go ahead and say smart field, client. We can say client full name. And again, these don't have to be bolded. There's bolded in there from the last time. We can unbold that. We can unbold this. Cool. Now, project fee agreed to, and this is a cool one. So we're actually going to be using an invoice smart field to populate this particular piece of information because, again, the amount that your client is paying is probably going to change each and every time that you're working with the clients. Some folks have standardized packages, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But even if you're using a package, you might customize that package to some degree, so it might change. So instead of typing out the exact amount that you know that a particular client is going to pay, we're going to use a smart field to pull it directly from their invoice to add it to their contract. So let's go ahead and say smart fields, invoice, and we can say invoice total. So whatever total is on that invoice is going to be populated here on this smart field right there. And it's going to go ahead and just reflect, hey, you owe $3,000 or whatever that value is. But that's the general idea about smart fields, is we're going to take information that we've generated elsewhere in the system. We're going to use smart fields as placeholders to customize and put in that information elsewhere in the system so that you don't have to type it out. It saves you a lot of time. That's the whole concept of smart fields. I'm hoping that that was clear for everybody, obviously, and making sure are there any questions about smart fields, because we can go through the rest of this contract and see if there's anything else we can customize. What I commonly see when I'm doing screen share calls with folks is that maybe they have a long contract, kind of similar to the one that I'm looking at right now. And in a lot of places, they have things like this, where it's like, okay, I know that right here, for example, this is a variable for me. It may not always be 14 business days as far as, when I want them to go ahead and pay, right? So they put in something like X, and they're just leaving it like that. And they're like, okay, I'll go ahead and customize that later on. That's totally fine to do, especially in the case where maybe there's not a field in Dubsado that's going to automatically be able to populate that for you. In Dubsado, we can create custom map fields. So if there isn't a field, we can certainly make one for you so that you can keep using smart fields going forward. But a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm just going to leave that in there and I'll customize it. That's the little piece there that if you're customizing that on every single client, it takes time. It adds up over time and you don't realize it. So instead of doing that, I almost always recommend that we either create a custom map field or use one of Dubsado's existing fields to go ahead and populate information in the contract so that you don't ever have to customize it. In the ideal sense, once your base contract template, which is what we're looking at right here, is done and complete, you would never have to touch it when you go ahead and send it to a client. You would go into the project, you would apply that contract, it will automatically populate with all the different fields that you have in there, and you know it's good to go. Obviously, there's going to be some outliers as far as like, hey, this one person has a really specific request that I want to accommodate. We can go ahead and account for that by just doing a manual edit within their contract. But generally speaking, I think about the contract template as being the common denominator, right? What's going to apply to the vast majority of your clients so that you do not ever have to customize it. That's the goal there. Sarah's asking, how do you create custom smart fields? Really good question, Sarah. We can go ahead and show that real quick. I don't want to take too much time because I want to make sure we get to the other stuff, but let's go ahead and do it real quick. So in this particular demo account, this is set up for a web designer. So let's go ahead and make a custom field for a web designer. Why not? Let's go ahead and do it. Go ahead and save and close this. We'll come back to this contract in just a moment. There's a couple of the things I want to show on here as well. All right, if I wanted to make a custom smart field or a custom mapped field for that matter, which in turn will make a custom smart field for us, I'm going to go up to the gear icon settings. And then from here, I'm going to be looking for custom mapped fields. So let's go ahead and click on that. Now here we have two different options for custom fields. We've got client map fields and we've got project map fields. And there's a really important distinction between the two. The best example I can give you for a client map field is information that's never going to change about your client. A really good example is their birthday, right? If your client says, hey, I was born on, January 1st, they're always going to be born on January 1st, no matter what happens in the future, right? And this is important. Maybe you have a repeat client, right? And you want to always know what their birthday is. That way you can send them maybe like a little happy birthday card in the mail, for example. As soon as you collect that client information and it's saved as a client mapped field, it sticks with the client over the course of as many projects that you have with them into the future. So if I have a client named Shelly, right, and their birthday's on January 1st, they work with me and they had a really good time. 6 months later, they might come back and want to work with me again. I will still have that information, their January 1st birthday, saved in that client map field if I start a new project for Shelly down the road. Now, by contrast, a project map field is information that is going to change with each and every project that you have with that client. So in this case, I know that I'm not working, this demo account set up more for a web design business, but let's just say maybe it was a wedding planner, right? Who's doing maybe like a rehearsal dinner. It's going to change each and every project. And maybe someone has a dinner set up for an engagement and then a dinner set up for the wedding. It's likely that those two dinner headcounts aren't going to be exactly the same. So you would want that field to reset with every project. That's the main difference there. Client information, client map fields is going to stay with the client. It's never going to change. Project map fields is going to reset with each new project. So for this particular example, let's think here. Let's go ahead and add in a project map field for this web design business. And I think a good field for a web design business would be something like, let's just do rounds of edits, because that might be different for each particular person. So let's do rounds of edits. If I'm a web designer, maybe I want to send my work to the clients, let them look at it, give me some notes, and then send it back to me and say, hey, fix this or change that. Maybe I typically do 3, but maybe I want to offer up to 5 or 6. So that might be a specific value that I would have for this particular project. So maybe we could do a custom field for that. So I'm going to go ahead and name this. I'm going to go ahead and name this field whatever I like. And the name is entirely up to you. It does not matter. But now I can go ahead and enter in a short answer or a date. Those are the 2 options as far as how we set this custom field up. In this case, I want it to be a short answer. So we're going to go ahead and pick short answer and not dates. Date would be the only example you'd want to use a date for is if you really just wanted it to be in date formats, but you could certainly use a short answer field to capture a date as well if you just wanted to type in like August 6th, for example, right? No wrong answer there as well. We'll go ahead and say save. Now we've got our custom map field. So we can head back to our contract there, and we can use this custom field instead of just typing it out in the contract. Let's go ahead and head back. Just refresh real quick. Now that I've created that custom map field, what also happened on the back end is the system generated a custom smart field for me, which may not be immediately obvious, which is why it's cool that we're going through this right now. So let's actually go back to that exact same spot we were here. So under payments and invoices, this particular heading here. So right now I have it stating that, let's see here. Oh, sorry, it was under amendments for work, 3 rounds of amendments. So we provide 3 rounds of amendments to our work at no extra charge. And then maybe in this particular sentence, I can say, as part of your fee, you paid for, and this is where I would want to use that smart field. So I can go ahead and say smart field. Since I made a project mapped field, it's going to be found under the project header right here. So I can click that. I can scroll down. I can see rounds of edits. Once I put that in there, now we've got, and it's a pretty long smart field, so don't let that scare you. This whole smart field right there, that's our custom smart field. So if I had information saved in that particular field, now it would automatically populate. So I can go back into a project and show you how to fill that information in. But this is also helpful in the sense that you can create that field, add it to maybe your lead capture form or your questionnaire, and let the client answer that for you. You could ask them, for example, in this case, how many rounds of edits would you like? And if they say 5, they answer 5 in that field. It's going to save that information to the field. And then on the contract, you can say you've paid for, and then fill in the blank, 5 fields. That's kind of how this generally works. So hopefully that helps. Sarah says, thank you. Perfect. Glad that helps, Sarah. Let's see if this actually makes sense in context, because later on we're going to apply this contract in a project. I want to make sure at least it doesn't look silly. So let's see here. It's part of a fee you've paid for, and we've got a custom app field. As long as the change is requested, do not substantially alter it. Cool. Nature project. Yeah, that's fine. We'll leave it like that for now. Cool. Okay. Let's take a look at the rest of this contract before we move on to packages and applying stuff in a project. So something that commonly happens when I'm working with users on screen share calls is they have their contract maybe in like a Google Doc or even a PDF, some other format, a Word doc. And they're like, cool, I just want to take that, throw it into Dubsado. That's totally fine. You can just copy and paste it, add it into a text box field here on the left-hand side, paste it all in there. The one thing is like, hey, maybe I want to have some initial fields after 1 or 2 of my different clauses in my contract. As you can see here, this is all one big text box. So in that case, let's say if I scroll down a little ways, maybe I want there to be an initial field after the force majeure clause. So if that was the case, I would click into this text box. I'm just going to take this entire piece here. I'm going to go ahead. Oops, let's see here. I'm going to cut this. I'm going to say Command X. And then from here, now I'm going to go ahead and add in an initial field. I can drag this and drop this in here. The only thing I'm doing is just splitting up my text. That way, let's go drag that up there. That way I can add that initial field in there. That's a common question that I get is like, hey, I can't add an initial field in the middle of this text box. And that's true. You'd have to go ahead and take the piece above, remove what's below, add in the initial field. And then now we can go ahead and add in a new text box and add in what I removed. There we go. So the only thing you might have to pay attention to is your numbering system. It's going to restart your numbering system. See here, it was at 21. This was originally 22. I know now it's down to 1 and 2. You could manually go in there and type 22 if you wanted to continue, but a lot of folks use Roman numerals or A's, B's, that kind of stuff. There's not really a right or wrong way to go ahead and format your contract. It's going to be entirely up to you and your taste as far as how you do your numbering system. There's a lot of ways to do it correctly and a lot of ways that it probably doesn't matter too much. You could always contact a legal professional if you wanted advice on how to go ahead and organize or construct your contract, but it's something I just want to call out to y'all. If we want to add these initial fields in here in between of clauses, we got to have 2 separate text boxes. Obviously, on the contract, we could also change the fonts. We could change bolding things around. We could do that. The way we do that within a text box is if I click into this, we use this A formatting options button right here. So let's say maybe I don't want this to be bolded. I could obviously just do Command B to unbold it, or I could have it highlighted and say A. I can go over to, let's see here, not alignments, paragraph formats. Oops. Oh, sorry, B's right there. I'm looking for other stuff under the A there. The A's got a bunch of other things that we can use, things like color. We can go ahead and color that text if you want to. We can do things like alignments, paragraph formats. We can add these lists, ordered lists, unordered lists. We can even add quotes in there. We can have things like links or images, that kind of stuff. We can do that all within the text box using this little A button. And that's something that gets overlooked commonly since this tiny little button hides a lot of the extra formatting options in there. So keep an eye out for that if you're trying to do something specific within your text box. The other thing that can be helpful as well, especially if you're copying something from Microsoft Word, is sometimes the formatting from Word will transfer into Dubsado a little bit funky just because you've copied in formatting from Microsoft Word. In that case, you might want to do this. If we take all of your wording here, highlight it all, click the A formatting options, and then over here on the far right-hand side, we have clear formatting. That's actually going to undo all the formatting that you copied from Microsoft Word unknowingly and remove it. So that way you can manipulate it in Dubsado a little bit more easily. So if I click clear formatting, all it did was just take away my bolding since there wasn't anything else here. But that can be really helpful if you've got some really heavily indented lines on your contract in Word and you just kind of want to redo the spacing and indenting on Dubsado. Use that eraser tool under the A formatting options to go ahead and undo it and then redo it in Dubsado. That way it kind of lines up a little bit better. Okay. Cool. We covered the A formatting options. We covered that. Last thing on here, we've got some signature fields. And if you're unfamiliar, if you're new to Dubsado, right, this is a really good way to go ahead and get rid of things like DocuSign, get rid of paper contracts, because it's going to save you so much time. The idea here is we can add in a signature field and we can just tell the system, hey, the signature field is for the client. In this case, if you were to open the contract yourself as the business owner, it won't let you sign here. It knows you're not the clients, right? Likewise, we can have a counter signature area here for the business owner. And it just says that the signature field is for the owner, which is fantastic. Obviously, we can manipulate this signature text right here. We can have this say whatever we want to. Likewise, we can say, maybe you don't work with businesses. You want to just say, I. Totally do that. You can say, I agree to the above. It's up to you whether you want to have it be set up for businesses, B2B, or for individuals, but that's the idea there. You do not have to have a counter signature field. Just want to call that out as well. A lot of folks will have this in there just by default because the sample contract will have one in there and feel obligated to keep it in there. But if you're someone who's like, hey, I don't need to, or my clients typically don't mind if I'm not signing the contract, don't worry about it. That's totally fine. You can go ahead and just get rid of this. If you wanted to add it back in, no worries. We can go ahead and add in that signature field right here. Just make sure it's set to business owner. This little yellow area here that notes that this field is for you to countersign, that you won't see it. That's true. We'll go ahead and take a look at that once we're inside of a project. You will not see this when you go ahead and view it, and the client won't see that little yellow field there as well when they go ahead and sign this. Okay, cool. I think that's just about everything I wanted to talk about. The biggest thing for contracts is smart fields, in my opinion, right? It's going to save us a lot of time from going ahead and populating all the client-specific information for your business, right? You don't have to worry about customizing these contracts. The rest of what I have in this particular sample contract is more just boilerplate language for a contract. Obviously, your contract doesn't have to be this long. It could be much longer. There's no right or wrong answer. I get questions about like how to set up a contract all the time. And I think that as long as you've maybe taken a look online or contacted a legal professional for like any baseline advice on what needs to be legally binding, there's not really going to be a wrong way to go about doing it. Just make sure that you have your terms and conditions in there, that whatever policies you have established for your business are in your contract, and you'll be pretty safe. I want to take a pause for a moment and see if there's any questions about contracts. We've got something in the Q&A. Let's take a look, unless that was the old one in there. Oh, cool. All right, Alexis was asking, when you get to client contact, could you please show how to add 2 clients? Wedding planner, here's the bride and groom, for example. Great question, Alexis. Cool. So, and then she asked as well, would this custom map field work for a second client smart field? You definitely could use a custom map field, Alexis, for second clients, but really commonly, since we do have a lot of wedding planners here in Dubsado, this is what they'll go ahead and do. So in that case, let's just pretend that this client contact person was the first person in a pair of 2, or a bride and groom situation. We can use the regular client name, the primary clients in the project. If you want to add in the other person, the other party involved in that wedding, let's go ahead and tab down and we can just say, would it be spouse? I guess it would just be, let's just say partner. Let's say partner. And then instead of using the regular client field here in Dubsado, every single client has an alternate contact by default already in the fields of their client contacts in their address book. Now, obviously, not everyone's going to be using the alternate contact, but you can use the alternate contact as the second party. So if I did have an alternate contact saved, I can go to Smart Fields, Clients, and see here we have client alt contact first, client alt contact last. We're going to be using some of these smart fields to populate the other person's name. We don't need to make a custom map field for this particular case because as long as that information is saved in the alt contact fields, we'll have it right here. So in this case, I would go ahead and just say, let's see, alt contact first, smart fields, project, not project, put a space in there, clients, alt contact last. So it's going to have the client's first and last name, the alternate contact there. So that way, if you have like, hey, I've got Shelly and I've got Joe, right? It would have Joe's name here secondarily if he was the alternate contact, as well as his last name if you wanted to have that included as well. Alexis, let me know if that answers your question. We can go into a little bit further if you like. You could do the exact same thing with the custom map field and just put in, partner and make that a custom map field. But since the alternate contact field is already there, you just save yourself the hassle of making a new field and go ahead and do it that way. Okay, Alexis, this is sweet, perfect. Okay, any other questions about contracts before we move on? I know we didn't take too much time to go over all the other fields here that we have possible in a contract, but the main idea of a contract, in my opinion, is to have just your language there clear and simple for your clients. Like I said, populating information. We're not worried too much about collecting information, which is what a lot of these fields are, especially for those of you who are relatively new to Dubsado. Like, we're not worried too much about short answer fields or free response fields, date selects. You certainly could have those fields in your contract, but most users in my experience are using the contract just to display information. You're not collecting anything new. We're going to have some other webinars coming up that will show a little bit more about how to go setting up like things like a proposal and that sort of thing. So stay tuned for other webinars in the future if you have questions about how to set up a form for using those kind of field elements. Kelly asks, if you're able to pull the project fee in this example, do you suggest creating the invoice for a client before the contract? Really good question, Kelly. We're going to talk all about that in just a second, actually. So right now, let's keep in mind that what we're working on here is the contract template. This is working on the contract template itself. So in Dubsado, context is really important. Right now, since I'm working on a base template, there is no project context for this contract. This is just in general, right? This isn't asking me, or this particular client, I apologize, this particular contract doesn't know what client I'm referring to, for example, because I could be referring to any client. So right now I'm just customizing my contract for every client going forward. Once we get into the instance of a particular client, we'll talk about which one you should do first or second. In our example today, it's not really going to matter whether you set up the contract first or the invoice first. The important thing is that you have the invoice created before you send the contract, and we'll show that in just a minute. Because it makes sense, right? If you don't have an invoice generated, then this particular field right here is not going to have any information to pull from. And that's true about any other smart field in the system. For example, if your contract has this alternate contact smart fields in here, but the client you're working with doesn't have any information saved to that field, it will just show up as blank. So again, we always want to make sure that that information exists before we can pull it into a smart field. Same concept applies to this invoice versus contract situation. Cool. Let's go ahead and take a look. So I'm going to save and close that. Whenever we're working on our form, is make sure we save and close, or just save and keep working. Make sure you retain your work. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick look at our package templates before we get into invoice generation. All right, so over here on the left-hand side under templates, we're going to go down to packages. Now, this is the area where we can set up maybe some of our base services with their prices and details. So that way you don't ever have to type it out over and over and over again. It's just going to be saved in the system, and you can easily add that information to an invoice with a couple clicks. Now, every single sample or trial account in Dubsado is going to have these sample packages in here just for you to play around with. And you're welcome to edit these or just delete them entirely if you want to clean up your account. Down here at the bottom, I've got 2 base packages added in already. So if I was a web designer, maybe my basic package is $1,500. Maybe I have a more expensive Premier package that's $3,000. Now, let's go ahead and edit this Premier package just to show you an example. Because right now, there's not a whole lot of information saved in here. So if I click on the gear icon, we can go ahead and go here on the right-hand side and click Edit. And maybe I want to add in a description, right? Maybe as part of the Premier package, I want to offer clients 5 rounds of revisions. That's more than my base 3. Let's say that was kind of an add-on. And maybe on top of that, we'll add in 3 logos. Just as an example, I'm just kind of pulling some stuff out of nowhere to say, like, maybe this is part of my base package. But the idea is if this information is saved into the description, it's going to display on the client's invoice as well. Now, some folks have really long descriptions on their package templates. Some folks don't use them for much else, right? They have maybe that information saved just on the contract. They don't need their invoice to be super long. That's entirely up to you. There's no wrong way to go about it. Just like a lot of things in Dubsado, it's entirely to your taste. If you wanted to have more information here, that's totally fine. If you want to have nothing there, that's also totally fine. But let's just review a little bit about how to set these things up, since I had this sort of pre-packaged or pre-made in here. This invoice item name is going to display on the client's invoice. Whereas at the top here, if I click this, this is my internal name for it, right? Maybe you want to have just a simple like package 1 for yourself because you know package 1 is Premier, but you don't want to show just package 1 to your client. You would go ahead and rename it here at the top as opposed to the invoice item name. So down here at the bottom, this particular piece, this is what's showing to the client. Likewise, anything you add in the description field here is also going to show to the client on the invoice. And we'll show you just how this looks on an invoice in just a moment. Make sure under quantity that we always set this to at least 1. If I have everything else set up in here correctly, but I forget to set this to more than 0, it's still going to show as $0 on the invoice. And I'm going to be like, why is it showing $0? So when you're setting up your package templates, make sure you have it at least 1. Obviously, you can have this, maybe your base offering is 5. That wouldn't apply in a situation like web design, for example, but maybe you are a florist, right? And your base package has 5 bouquets in it. You could have this set to 5 and your price would then be, the total price of 5 bouquets, for example. In that case, let's say it was like a $100 bouquet. You want to go ahead and say price is 100 times 5 being 500 for the max total. So it's going to take whatever your quantity is times the price to get to your total item subtotal. Cool. Randall asks, Trevor, when I've added packages in the past, the details of the package haven't shown in the proposal. How do I get the details of the package to show in the proposal? Really good question, Randall. That's going to come down to smart fields once again. I can actually show you that real briefly. I don't want to take too much time looking at proposals because that is probably a different conversation, but I will happily show you, Randall, how to do that. Let's finish what we're talking about here real quickly, and then I'll jump over to that, Randall. All right. So like I said, quantity of at least 1. And then if this is a taxable item, we can go ahead and add in our tax here, right? Maybe you have California state tax, 12%. And we can go ahead and add that in there. That way you never have to worry about adding tax onto those line items ever in the future. It's just going to be added by default. A lot of services aren't taxable, so maybe you don't need that. We can go ahead and remove it too. Category down here at the bottom, we can add new categories. These are income categories. This is just internal for your own purposes. Maybe you want to have a different income category for your different services. I might have a Premier category to categorize every time I use this particular Premier package. And that way, at the end of the day, I could go down to reporting and then my chart of accounts to see how much money I brought in under just the Premier package. Maybe I want to see that versus my basic package and see which package is doing better. Maybe I'm making a lot of money on my Premier packages, so I want to try and upsell those since those are doing really well. You could use the chart of accounts categories to see that information after some time has passed, so you can see how well you're doing in different categories. Again, this is entirely optional. It's just for your own purposes, and you can name these categories whatever you like. There's no wrong answers here, but it's just for you to help organize some of your reporting coming in. All right, let's go and get rid of that. Cool. And then I think that's about all we need to talk about here on these package templates. If there are any questions about package templates, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and show Randall real quick how to add in his package details here to his invoice. We'll talk about that real briefly. So go ahead and say save item. Whenever I make a change to an existing package template and it's already on a particular proposal, this modal will pop up. So don't be afraid if you see this. It's just going to say, hey, do you want to update your particular proposals that have this package template on it? And in this case, I do actually. So let's go ahead and say update templates. Again, like I said, it's saying this package is used one time on your proposals. Would you like to update it? And I'd say, yes, update my templates. Cool. All right, Randall, let's take a look real quick. So to do that, let's go ahead and head down to our forms page, templates forms. Let's go ahead and take a look at this 3Dubs design. Okay, so here I am right now with this exact package template that we were just looking at a second ago. And I'm actually in a very similar situation that you're describing, Randall. You're like, cool, I have my package in here. I can see under select a package, I have the correct one. Why isn't it showing that description? If I double click into this particular package field here, now we can see that this information is comprised entirely of smart fields, right? Package.name is pulling in the name of our package. And then package.total/100 currency is pulling in the actual grand total, that $3,000 figure from that package information. Maybe I want to add in those details. So I'm going to click down on return to add in a new line. And then under package smart fields, if I go ahead and say package item names and descriptions, we're looking for that particular smart field because that's going to go ahead and pull in the description piece of that package template. So if I add that in there, that particular smart field actually uses the name already. So I don't even need this particular smart field anymore. It's going to have that in there by default. If I click that, now we've got Premier Web Design Package, and it's got my 5 rounds of revisions, 3 logos, plus the price there. And that's how you would go ahead and add in your particular descriptions. Sweet. Randall says, thank you. Awesome. Okay. Like I said, folks, I don't want to spend too much time on a proposal. We're going to talk about proposals coming up in a webinar real soon. This is going to be kind of a series of webinars that I'm doing kind of on some more basic stuff just to get people going. And we're definitely going to talk about proposals on a webinar coming up real soon. Okay. Now that we've talked about our contract, we talked about customizing our contracts and smart fields, we talked about making package templates. And I want to make sure that I'm being clear. Package templates are optional. You don't have to use them because a lot of folks are like, hey, I have really bespoke offerings to my clients and it's never the same. You might not get too much utility out of package templates if that's the case, but you certainly could still have a base template that you then just add to your particular invoices and customize from there. So don't let that stop you from making some templates. But templates are, the package templates at least, are optional, I would say, but they are super helpful if you at least have some kind of common denominator. But now what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to go ahead and go to a particular project, and we're going to pretend like, hey, okay, this is a new client of ours, and I want to go ahead and generate that invoice, make sure it's correct for them, and then we'll go ahead and apply that contract, and we're going to send both items out to that client. All right, cool. So for now, we're going to go up to projects, and here we've got Shelly Howard. Shelly's my new client. She's going to be starting with me on the 30th. Let's go ahead and get her set up in Dubsado. Now, I already made this project. If there's questions about how to go ahead and make a project, please let me know. I can kind of double back on how to do that. But for now, let's just pretend, this is a new client of mine, kind of a brand new project. As you can see here on the left-hand side on my lead capture form, I already captured a bunch of information about Shelly, right? I asked her what her name was. She gave me Shelly Howard. I asked what her email was. I got her email, her phone number. Alexis, this is the alt contact right here, right? Raymond Ferris. And thinking in this particular example, I'd set this up previously for a wedding planner. So that was exactly your example there. But we can leave that in there for now. That's totally fine. So we've got 2 different clients. But again, Shelly is our primary contact. And when we send emails, it's going to be going to Shelly unless I also add in Raymond there as the alternate contact. And maybe she's got her clients or her company name is Howard's Happy Weddings. So her name is Shelly Howard. Just an example, fake person. We can use this as an example. So if I want to go ahead and make an invoice for Shelly, I can go ahead and click on the Invoices tab. And for here, whole lot of nothing to look at, right? There is no invoice in this project just yet, and that's totally fine. Over here on the right-hand side, we can click Add to add a new invoice. Cool. So now we've got a blank invoice to work with. Now, if you've gone ahead and made your package templates already, then your work here is relatively straightforward. All you would need to do to use a package template is click Packages over here on the right-hand side. And then from here, you could go ahead and add in any existing package templates. So maybe I know that Shelly wants to use the Premier package. I can click Premier. It's going to automatically populate that information into this invoice. That's all it took. 2 clicks. I clicked Packages, and I clicked the actual package that I wanted to add in here, and now it's there. This invoice is worth a total of $3,000. So really straightforward if you have your package templates created. And like I said, really good if you're a business that has some standard offerings, but maybe you don't have that. Maybe you want to make some custom line items. Let's go ahead and show how to do that. And it's going to be very similar to how we set that package up. So let's go ahead and remove this for a second. So let's say, all right, brand new invoice. I need to make kind of a custom line item for my client, Shelly. So I'm going to click New Line Item. From here, let's go ahead and say Custom Web Build. Maybe Shelly had some really specific things that she was requesting for her web builds, and I don't have a package that's going to cover that. I'd rather just make a brand new one. This is how I would go ahead and do it. So for Shelly, maybe she's like, I need, 10 pages on my website, which is maybe more than I typically do. She needs 5 logos. Maybe she also needs 7 revisions because she's really particular with how she wants her website to look. And maybe she also needs like, let's see here. What else would she do? Probably some, custom web domain integrations. So like custom emails, that kind of stuff. I'm really setting her up entirely for her whole business. So this is going to be a relatively pricey package, but I'm just showing you an example, right? Very similar to how we did on that package template. I'm just giving it a name. I'm adding in all the details that go towards that particular package. I'm going to make sure I set this quantity to 1. And then for this price, let's say it was $5,000 because I guess I'm doing a little bit more work. Same thing as we just talked about for tax. If this was taxable, I could go ahead and add this in here. Let's say you don't have that tax added just yet. All you need to do is say new tax item, give it a name, give it a percentage, and it will automatically be saved to your chart of accounts. And you only have to make it the one time. Once you've made it once, it'll be in this drop down for you to use later on. So don't worry about making it each and every time. At some point in the past, I made this California state tax. Now it's there. I can use it whenever I'd like to. Same thing for category. Make it once. Once you've made it, it'll be there for the future. Let's see here. Ali was asking, could you show us how to create the project for the client? This would need to be done before creating and sending invoice, correct? Yes, Ali, that's exactly right. We would need to make this before we create and send the invoice. I can go ahead and double back and show that in just a moment. I think that was about it for what I wanted to show here on this particular package. So let's just pretend for the time being that there was no tax and I don't care about the category for the time being. So let's just say add item to finish adding that line item. Now that I've added that line item, we can see it right here. We can see the subtotal and total down here is changed to $5,000. Cool. Before I go back and make a project and show Ali how to do that real quick, I want to talk about the other two options we see here. So for notes, if I wanted to add a note to the clients, I could go ahead and type it in right here. And you might be wondering, well, where is this going to show up? So let's just type in this as a note because it's kind of a boilerplate. Save that. Once I say done, now it's saved. And if I go ahead and show you how to view this invoice from the client's perspective, you'll see where that note shows up. So let's say I'm the business owner and I'm done making my invoice, but I want to preview it. I want to see what it looks like before I send it to the clients. We can totally do that. If I go ahead and click send and I say open a new window, this is going to open this in a new tab. And this is actually the exact thing that the client will see when they go ahead and access this invoice. It's just a URL. We're sending them a URL. It's going to be exactly what they see. We can see here we've got our custom web build for quantity of $5,000. And we can see under notes, I can say this is a note. So this is a really common and handy place to put in things like, hey, you know, this is a large ticket item. I'd prefer you to pay me via check, for example, something like that, or whatever note you needed to add into them. Like, hey, let me know if you have any questions. You could add something like that in there. Really super simple if you wanted to add in some notes to add in right here under this notes category. But again, that's what that little notes section is. Right now on this particular invoice, I haven't added in a payment plan. So we can talk about that in a moment, but let me see what's going on in the chat here. Oh, Randall says you can't see the new window. I apologize. Thank you, Randall. Can you all see that now? Hopefully, I think so. Yeah, I see it on my screen now. Cool. Apologies, everyone. I can do that again. So this is exactly what the client would see. And this, like I said, is just we're sending them a URL. So this isn't going to be any difference at all from what the client will see when you actually email them the invoice. And like I said, we have our custom web build package that we added in. We customize that. And again, if we want to add in a note, it's going to show up right here. Really helpful place. You just need to add a note to your clients from that other invoice page there. Let's see here. Alexis asks, how did you add the branding there? So by default, your brand logo will be added into your Dubsado invoice. You don't even need to customize that at all. So if I toggle back over to Dubsado, let me share that one. Cool, did it right this time. Sweet. So that logo is being pulled from my branding page. If I go up to settings and I go up to branding, this logo right here, that's used in a lot of places. As you can see here on the upper right-hand corner, it's denoting which brand I'm in the top right corner. I know it's pretty small, but it's also going to be used on my invoice by default. It's going to be used in a couple different places. Cool. All right, so let's double back. Ali was asking about creating a new project, and then Lori, I'll get to your question just after that, okay? So if I want to go back to projects, maybe you've got a new client come in. Now, keep in mind, if you're brand new to Dubsado and you're like, hey, I'm just kind of getting used to stuff, I can totally understand making projects manually. But one of the really strong things about Dubsado is that if you're using our lead capture form, it's going to make a brand new project for you. So what I'm about to show you may actually be redundant. You may not need to do it at all if you're utilizing our Dubsado lead capture form. The idea of a lead capture form is that it's going to take in that client's information that they're being asked of and filling out on that form. As soon as they submit that form, it's going to automatically generate a new project for you. So you won't have to worry about making the project. But maybe you had somebody reach out via word of mouth. Like you're like, hey, my friend told a friend about my business and they were just interested and they want to get going. They're like, hey, send me a proposal. They just want to jump right to it, right? You're like, cool. I'm not even going to bother asking them to fill out a lead capture form. I'm going to make a new project by clicking new project here on this main projects tab. Now I can go ahead and enter in a project title. Maybe their name is, let's just say Jane Doe. I can say web build. Now, if I had an existing client that I wanted to assign this project to, I can assign that project to any of these clients here, but maybe it's somebody brand new, right? I'm going to say create new clients. like I said, her name was Jane Doe. Oops. So all I'm doing here is just kind of replicating what the lead capture form would already be grabbing, right? We can title our project whatever we like. The title up here is entirely up to you. There's no wrong way to do it. And actually, I didn't even match my old nomenclature there. I have website build, and then I have the name of the client. So let's just be consistent at least. Oops, perfect. And then we're asking the client's first name, the client's last name, and at minimum, we need the client email as well. So we'll just say JDO23. Obviously, if they have a company name or a phone number or any other information you already have about the client, you can add it in here as well. But I would say at minimum, always make sure you're adding in, you need to add a title. It won't let you save it if you don't. First name, last name, and email, right? Those are the kind of the base things we need to save about the clients and the project in order to create this. And then the last thing here is we need to assign a status. And if you're unfamiliar with Dubsado, it's referring to these statuses that are kind of behind this modal right now. And we can talk about those in a second. But for now, let's just go ahead and say this is a lead no status, or so that's job, lead no status. There we go. Tags, this is another way to organize your projects. You might have tags created for different kind of package templates. You have tags for all sorts of things, but it's just another vector by which you can organize your projects. And then notes as well. But again, bare minimum, the title of the project, first name, last name, email, and then a status. You can say create project. Hopefully that helps answer your question there, Ali. Okay, cool. So let's just back out of this project. I don't need this one for the time being. So we'll go back to Shelly. All right. So Lori was asking, how do you add a credit card fee? And that's a really good question, Lori. So by default in Dubsado, there's not going to be a good way to add in a separate fee for a credit card. However, I will tell you that with the advent of Dubsado payments, we actually generated and created our own surcharging system that can automatically add in a surcharge if your client is paying with a credit card. So this is definitely getting a little bit off topic from the whole core of what we're talking about today, but it's important to call out that if you're signed up with Dubsado payments, and that's just Dubsado payments powered by Stripe. So if you go into your brand settings here and go ahead and go do payments and invoices. And right now I'm connected with Dubsado payments. You can see here surcharging. I haven't set it up yet. That's why it's grayed out. But if you live in most of the states in the United States, there's a couple states where surcharging is not allowed federally, but as long as you're in an area or your business is based in an area where it's allowed, you can set this up and it will automatically add in a surcharge if your client is paying via credit card. So that would be the best way to go ahead and add in a credit card fee to your Dubsado invoices, Lori. Cool. Okay, Alexis had another question. Let's see here. She was asking about, can the client see the notes in that section? So let's talk about the notes as well a little bit. If I go back to invoices, if you add in a note right here, this is meant for the client, right? This area right here, they can see that note. If you're talking about these notes over here on the right-hand side and during project creation, that little add notes section, that's correlating to here. This is just for you. So two different places for notes. I know they're both called notes, but it's a good question. These notes here, if I say add note, the client will not see these notes at all. This is just for you, just for you. Whereas on the invoice page, if I go back to invoices and I add a note here, the client will see this. If I were to remove that, it says type something. Let's see if it goes back to that default language. No, it doesn't. Okay, that's a note for client. But the idea here is on the invoice, this is intended for the client to see. Cool. All right, I think I missed a couple here. Let's see. Kelly was asking, I'm an interior designer and need more columns for each item, i.e. I am billing someone for a couch and needed to include delivery fees, taxes, markup, etc. Can additional columns be added to the invoice? Really good question, Kelly. So in Dubsado, there's not any way to manipulate these columns here at the top, right? The item description category, that sort of thing. So I'm afraid there's not going to be a way to add in any additional columns. Let me think of this a better way to go ahead and do that though, for your particular situation. Couch, delivery fees, taxes, markup. I think in that case, Kelly, your best bet would be to do like one line item for base price and then new line item for delivery fee for that particular item. Or in that case, like I'm assuming you have more than one item, right? It's not just one couch. You might be able to compile all of the delivery fees into one line item. You might be able to compile all of the markups into one line item. I'm not sure if that makes sense for your business. I'm not super familiar with interior design, so please tell me if I'm way off base here. But unfortunately, there's not going to be any way to add in additional columns to add in stuff like what you're asking for. I know we do have a ton of interior designers on Dubsado though, so I'm sure someone has a really good system for setting that up. It might be what I mentioned, which is just creating separate line items for things like the delivery fee that have to get tacked on. But what I recommend is going on our YouTube channel and seeing like if we have any interior designers that have made videos about how to use Dubsado, because I'm pretty positive we have them on there. I can always take a look afterwards. Send me an email, Kelly, if you want more information on that. All right. Cynthia asks, if a client pays cash and the payment was applied, however, a refund was done, how do you show you did a cash refund? Good question, Cynthia. So let's go ahead and cancel this real quick. Let's say that the client paid in cash. If that was the case, we would go ahead and say apply payment. We can go ahead and say method cash, and I'm going to put in $500. So they paid in cash, right? Perfect. Cash payment right there. We applied it, and that was it, right? Now they want a refund on that cash payment. We could go ahead and click this right here. We could say the 3 dots icon right next to that payment at the bottom of this, say refund. And right here, when we have this refund modal, it's going to ask us how we returned that money. So like in the instance where they paid cash and you gave them cash back, we'd leave this as cash. Maybe they gave you cash and you gave it back to them via Stripe. You would go ahead and pick whatever payment method you returned it to. That's a general concept. Make sure that you're just clicking the 3 dots icon next to the payments, and then we can specify how the payment was returned and how much it was returned for. Cool. Alexis notes under client contact. Alexis, okay, cool. I'll make sure I answered your question. Sweet. And then Kelly says, thank you. I think the separate line items will work. I'll check YouTube. Fantastic, Kelly. Yeah, please feel free to send me an email if you have more questions on that, Kelly, after you've taken a look. But like I said, I know we have a ton of interior designers, and I might be able to think a little bit more clearly while I'm not trying to juggle so many things. We can come up with a good solution for you, but I know it's doable. Cool. Cynthia says, thank you. Okay. Lots of questions coming in. I really appreciate you all's questions. It's fantastic. I love hearing and seeing what y'all are thinking about. It's fantastic. If there's any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, I can move on to the kind of last chunk here, which is, hey, okay, we've generated our invoice. We have our contract all set up. Let's go ahead and prep these and send them out to our client. That's kind of the last piece here. So for the time being, let's go ahead and say that this custom web build is exactly the right amount. And for our purposes, we can just add in a simple payment plan. We're not going to spend too much time talking about payment plans. I'm actually going to remove this payment as well, just so it's clean. We can add in an existing payment plan, just say 50-50. I don't even think it's going to matter for our particular contract. I don't think we added that smart field on there, but just to have something on there in case we got our 50-50 payment plan. Cool. So now that we have our invoice generated, I know this is a question from before, right? Now that there's some information to pull from, that smart field that's on our contract has some info that it can actually add into the contract here. So let's just kind of see where the secret sauce is, which is now if we go ahead and go to contract, we can say add a contract to this project. We're going to pick our 3Dubs design website design contract. So when I say add, it's going to go ahead and apply this particular contract to this project. And we can see here, it's already populated in here, right? It's added in exactly today's date and time. We've got their business name. We've got the client's name. We've got their partner in this case, right? It may not necessarily be relevant for a web design business, but we added that in there. So we got it. And we have their total fees that they need to pay. So I didn't have to touch that. I didn't have to type any of that out. I didn't have to reference anything. It's just automatically there because that information was already in the project, which is fantastic. Go ahead and add that. And now the cool thing too, let's say that you're like, cool, I actually want to countersign this contract. You're like, sweet, I can click the down arrow on this contract and I can say open. I'm going to go ahead and share this tab instead. Sweet. You see that? Fantastic. Okay. So now this is exactly what the client would see when they open this contract, with the exception of they would not see this particular banner at the top. So Dubsado is cool. Like it can tell if you are logged into Dubsado while you're viewing a piece of content, and it will show you at the top, hey, you're logged in as the business owner. So it's going to look slightly different for you because we don't want the client, for example, to see the counter signature field or to actually be able to interact with it. So if you wanted to view the contract as the actual clients, you can open the item, whether it be a contract or a different kind of form, in either a different browser. Like right now I'm in Chrome, you could use Safari, for example, or you could use an incognito or private window to view it as the client. That way the system does not think that you're the business owner who's logged in. Currently, I'm in an incognito window already, so it wouldn't work if I wanted to go ahead and open a new incognito window, but I would typically just go into Safari and check it that way. But for most people, you don't necessarily even need to do that. Using the business owner view is perfectly fine for this case. So scrolling through here, we can see that we've got all this information. If we actually scroll down here, I didn't actually end up adding in any information into that custom field. So let me go ahead and add in some information to that. Let's take a look. If I go down to custom mapped project fields. This is doubling all the way back to that conversation we were having about creating custom fields. I created that field, but I never actually added any information in there. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I click that pencil icon under round of edits, I was saying that this person paid for 5 rounds of edits. I know that conflicts with our package. So let's just go with it for a second here, just so we have an example. So I added in a 5 there. Now, if I go back to our contract, I apologize. I didn't change the tab there. You guys can see this, right? Okay, cool. Cool. All right. Now that I added in 5, let's see here. Where was it? Okay. So now we just have the number 5 right in there. So really simplistic example for just rounds of edits. And I put in a 5 in that field, but I didn't have to customize it. That's the whole key here, is that this particular 5 was generated by that big long smart field just because I wanted to make sure that they are noting you've paid for 5 revisions as long as they've requested those changes, for example. Just a quick example of using those custom smart fields. In this case, I populated that information. Sometimes you can have, like I said, the client populate that information if you're adding it to a questionnaire earlier on in your process, but in this case, I filled it in myself. Cool. So the whole idea here is now that we're looking through this contract, we can make sure this all looks correct. We like the way it looks. We like to make sure it has all the right information in here. Fantastic, fantastic. We can keep going. Scroll all the way down. If we want to go ahead and sign as the business owner, we can go ahead and do that. So if I click on the business owner's counter signature field, I can go ahead and sign this. Oops. If I could type our company, that'd be great. There we go. So one thing to note here, if I tried to click on this particular signature field, you can see my mouse, right? It's X'd out. It's not going to let me sign that client field. So that's super easy and straightforward that you can't actually mess that up, right? If it's a business owner field and it's set to business owner, you can only fill that one in. This is just for the client. It knows that I'm signed in as the business owner. It's not going to let me sign that field. Cool. So we can go ahead and say countersign. So now if the client were to go ahead and access this contract later on, they'll see I've already signed actually. And we can see digitally signed by my full name, and then it's going to show the exact date and time as well as the IP address. So this contract is legally binding, right? We can see that that person signed at that IP address at that date and time for your records. That way, if any disputes happen, you know you've got that ironclad. Got that in there. Okay, sweet. So let's talk. The last piece here is just sending these things out. Let's go ahead and jump over here. Cool. All right, so now we know that our contract is ready to go and our invoice is ready to go. We can go ahead and send an email. So let's go over to emails. And as you can see here, a contract says needs sending, right? It notes that I have not yet sent it. So I said emails. There's a couple different ways to go ahead and do this. Some folks might want to send both the contract and the invoice in one email. We can show you how to do that. If I want to show you how to send the pieces individually, let's actually start with that. It's a little bit simpler. So if I wanted to just send the contract, I could click the down arrow here and I could say send. Really super straightforward. By default, it's going to go ahead and send it to the main contact as well as the alternate contact if I'm sending a manual email. If you're sending your contract via workflow, which I know we're not talking at all about automations and workflows, the alternate contact does not automatically get added in there. So sending a contract via a manual email might be beneficial if you wanted to send it to 2 different people at the same time. Anyways, this is my default send contract email. I could obviously customize this if I want to. I know this is pretty sparse as far as email is concerned, but maybe you have some custom language you've already added into a canned email template in Dubsado. Down here at the bottom, I can click the bookmark icon. I could scroll through these options to find the email that I wanted to pick. Now, I know that if I picked one of these at random, I don't have a different contract email set up. Let's see here. Just want to show you an example. So if I pick that, it's going to automatically pull in whatever was in that email, right? And I could go ahead and customize from there. But the key is that, typically speaking, we want to just go ahead and say down arrow and say send. It already has a link to my contract in there. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe, like I said, you added in a different email, and I want to make sure I add that link in there. I know this email doesn't line up perfectly with this scenario, but I could go ahead and say smart fields. I could go ahead and say link and then contract link. It's going to add that link back in there. So that would be how I send the contract out. And if I wanted to send the invoice individually, I could go to invoices. I could say send. I could say via email. Same thing here, exactly the same thing. It's going to pull up the send invoice email by default. I could pick a different email by clicking my bookmark icon down here at the bottom to access my canned emails. And let's say that my particular email didn't have my invoice link in there already. I could say smart fields link, and then I could say invoice link to add another one in there. Obviously, I don't need to. Just wanted to show you how to add it in there. But the general concept in Dubsado is whenever I want to send one piece of content, I want to go to wherever that piece of content is housed, right? So in this case, if I wanted to send the contract, I'm going to go over here on the left and say send on the contract. If I want to say send an invoice, I'm going to go to the invoices tab and send it from here. If I wanted to send maybe a form, I'd go to the forms tab and I would say send from here. Each piece of content has its own send button. And that's how the system knows which piece of content to send. We're giving the system context by telling it, hey, I'm clicking on this particular piece. I want to send that piece out. That's generally how it works. Now, the alternative is I could send more than one piece at a time if I want to by going straight to the emails tab and saying send email. And now from here, I actually have another option. So let's go ahead and add this and say contract and invoice. So I could say, hi, Smart Fields, client first name. Really handy if I want to go ahead and just pull in their name, for example. You can say, here's your contract and invoice. But there's no links in here, right? So if I want to go ahead and click on our links button down here, right next to this bookmark icon, there's this button right here. And this is going to be showing you all of the links that are available in this particular project. So in this particular project, I've got a form that says general sample, I've got an intake questionnaire, and then I have my contract and my invoice. So if I want to add in the contract, all I have to do is click that. Now I can tap down and add a new line in and say the same thing, links button here, and say invoice. So if I was just sending my contract and invoice, we're not talking about proposals because some folks will do proposal contract invoice, and there's a different way to do that. But if I wanted to send one email, so I'm not spamming my client with too many emails, I could send one email here with a link to my contract and a link to my invoice straight away. Maybe I want to change the title of this. I can go ahead and say, let's see here, edit link. Instead of invoice number 4, maybe I just wanted to say invoice. And that number 4 is just coming from the invoice number, right? If I go back to the invoices tab here, it'll show that that was invoice 4. But again, I can always click on these links and say edit link if I wanted to change the title of that link. Maybe you wanted to say instead of the actual contract's title, we could say, click here for contracts. I'm just throwing something out there. Something like that, right? We can customize those buttons. Are there any questions about how to send these things via email, folks? Coming up on just about an hour here. I know we've covered a lot of ground today. So if there's any questions, please throw them out there. You all have been fantastic about asking questions so far. I really appreciate that. Hopefully that makes sense. We went all the way through generating that contract, customizing the contract, customizing some package templates, customizing an invoice, going ahead and sending out that contract and invoice to get you going here in Dubsado. Any questions, folks? I'll give you just a moment to think about your questions. Whew. All right. Lori says, thank you. Yeah, no worries, Lori. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that was enough to get some folks going here. I know that in a Dubsado account, when you're first getting started, it can be a lot to look at. You're like, man, there's a lot of tabs. There's a lot of things I can do. At Dubsado, I think we really want to focus on just like, hey, what's going to be the biggest time saver, the biggest help to people who are using our system right off the bat? And we know that getting a contract out to a client is huge and sending an invoice out to a client is huge, since those two things can take a lot of time from business owners. So I think hopefully you can go back and look at the replay of this webinar if you have more questions or you want to kind of revisit some of the things I talked about. But having the confidence to go through and say, hey, I know I can add smart fields to my contract. That's big, right? Or I know I can customize an invoice and have it be exactly the right amount and send it out to my client. Just those two things alone, as soon as you start using the system, just gain some confidence in what you're doing, it's going to save you so much time. And that's what I really love about Dubsado. All right. Doreen was asking if there's going to be another Dubsado Basics training soon. And yes, Doreen, there definitely will be. I'm not sure. I don't think Becca's sent out our newsletter for next month just yet, but I'll tell you right now, a little insider knowledge. There's 100% going to be a bunch of webinars next month. I know that I myself will be hosting 2 more webinars. One of them will be more basic. One of them will be a little bit more advanced. And then we have some guests as well coming on to do 2 other webinars. So if you're a fan of these webinars, please stay tuned. Keep an eye out for that monthly newsletter. There are going to be links to sign up for all 4 of those webinars. But yeah, we've got a lot more of this content coming down the pipeline. And I really appreciate you all being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Let me go ahead and stop sharing. If there's any other questions while we're wrapping up here, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. But again, I really appreciate you all being here. And stay tuned for our other webinars. It's going to be a lot more good stuff coming up. The recording of this webinar, in case you were curious, is going to be sent out in just a couple hours. The system will automatically send you a link to view it on BigMarker. But as is the case that I was mentioning before, we also add everything into our YouTube channel, which can be helpful if you're searching for something in particular. So later today, you can find this webinar on YouTube as well. But I really appreciate everyone's time, and I appreciate all the questions you asked. It's fantastic. Cool. Randall says he loves this format. Good. I'm glad to hear that, Randall. I'm happy to do these. I love doing these, and I love talking and working with users. So it's been fantastic. But I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you so much. Bye.